The vigorous prophet Elijah has confronted the Israelite king Ahab and false prophets to the death. Now Elijah is being recalled by God and being replaced with Elisha. In the story, we read of travels, the parting of waters, and swirling fires from the sky. The mantle of Elijah is a cloak. Elisha receives the mantle of Elijah, and with it receives the prophet's power. A reading from 2 Kings, verses 2.1 to 2 and 6 to 14. Now when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But he said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of prophets also went and stood at some distance from them, as they both were standing by the Jordan. Then Elijah took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water. The water was parted to the one side and to the other, and the two of them crossed on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you before I am taken from you." Elisha said, "Please, let me inherit a double share of your spirit." He responded, "You have asked a hard thing. Yet if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted you. If not, it will not." As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." But when he could no longer see him, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in 2 pieces. Elisha picked up the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the water. He said, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? Where is he?" He struck the water again, and the water was parted to the one side and to the other, and Elisha crossed over.
Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth fertilize your planted seeds, O God. Amen. My mother birthed 4 boys in 4.5 years. Those of you who want to groan, go ahead. Tom and I are Irish twins, if you know what that is. There's Tom, Tim, Dan, and Dave. Thomas, Timothy, Daniel, and David. You might notice those are biblical. Thomas Richard, Timothy Charles, Daniel Arthur, and David Edward. We were also expected to be kings. But my parents got some good sense in them when they were in their mid-20s, because we were originally meant to be named Thomas, Timothy, Theodore, and Thaddeus. Tom, Tim, Ted, and Tad. I share that with you because when I give my name to people and they say Jim, and I say, no, Tim like Tom with an I. Today we encounter Elijah and Elisha. Elijah and Elisha. Elijah's the old one. Elisha's the new one. Biblical names will often gum us up. We're not sure what to do with them. I was walking into Jewel yesterday, and I thought of this text when in front of me was a little boy running ahead of his parents and getting between them and me and racing into the store with his great enthusiasm to be in a grocery store because he was about to get one of those future shopper carts. Talk about grooming. And they yelled to him, "Elias, Elias," which is another name for Elijah. Elias, Elijah, one of the names. And Elijah is one of my favorites in a couple of ways. One is that there is this magnificent story about trusting God. It's the widow of Zarephath. And if you haven't read it, read it. It is truly an amazing story. And as part of that story, now this is where we're going to start working on themes. Part of that story, Elijah resurrects a dead little boy. There are many resurrections in our Bibles. We just don't pay attention to them quite the same way. Elijah lived in the 9th century BCE, and he was a prophet against a king. Not a new concept. And the king's name was Ahab. Not the Captain Ahab of Melville's Moby Dick, but King Ahab. And of course, Ahab is not to be confused with Jonah, who was with the whale or the Leviathan, which is a story about not messing with God. And Ahab's wife is the famous Jezebel. Bible study this morning. Elijah was a difficult prophet for God. He had many great skills, many great blessings, and he was courageous and God-centered in ways that made us astounded when we were with him, and we are astounded by his strength today. He was difficult for God. Difficult because he stood up to King Ahab, and Ahab, through Jezebel, learned to worship agrarian gods. Baal, B-A-A-L, Baal. And so Elijah presided over challenges to these false prophets of the time, these agrarian prophets, and Elijah slaughtered more than 800 prophets of these agrarian gods. Part of the Bible we leave out every once in a while. And as you can imagine, this did not amuse King Ahab. So he called for the slaughter of Elijah. So Elijah got word from God, and God said, "You better get the heck out of town. This is exiling somebody. This is calling in the guards to send him on his way." And so he went into exile. Can you see how he might be a difficult prophet for God? Kind of getting things in trouble? And it winds up that Elijah couldn't work with anybody. So God decided it was time to begin again, to begin anew, to find a new prophet, to begin and begin again. So God says, now is the time to begin again. And we bump right into chapter 2 in 2 Kings. And in chapter 2, it's kind of a stark turn. We don't know that Elijah is about to be replaced. Suddenly it appears in the narrative. It's as if the author set down the pen and went away for a while and came back and said, okay, now I need to tell this part of the story. There's no transition. It's rather stark. There's no lead up, no time for a change, no time to get ready. It's just off you go. And then we have Elisha, which would have been a little bit different. Move the H and replace the J with an S, and that's how he would tell telemarketers how to spell his name. He is the apprentice or the assistant prophet, the second one. And there's a break in the way that we tell the story today, and that's just because the story starts getting repetitive. So we take off from the second verse all the way out. to the 6th. And in that part, it's just Elisha telling Elijah, I will go with you. And Elijah saying, you better stay here. And Elisha saying, no, I'm going to go with, you better stay. No, I'm going to go with you. No, we're going to cross this river and this river and this river. I'm going to stick with you as we go because I want to be with you. And then there's this strange piece that we need to unpack a little bit, and that's called the Father. Elisha calls Elijah Father. Did you catch that? But it is not a birth announcement. This is that Elisha venerated Elijah so bigly that he calls him Father. It is a sign of respect and relationship. It's not a paternal line, it is a prophetic line. And then we bump into verse 8. And verse 8 kind of stumps us and moves us into a strange place as we read it, because there is this mantle. Now, when we think of mantles, we think of fireplaces. So did Elijah go over and take the big thing off of the fireplace and whack? No. What the mantle is, in this case, is a representative talisman, token, place of God. And for Elijah, it is his cloak, the garment that he wears, the outer garment that he wears. And he takes it and he rolls it up. And then what does he do with it? He strikes the Jordan. And what happens to the Jordan River? Thank you. Somebody was listening. It parts. The waters separate. Charlton Heston standing there with his staff. The waters separate. Wait a minute. This doesn't sound like the story that we know. This is not who? Moses parting the waters of the Yam Suf, the Reed Sea. This is Elijah parting the waters with a garment, a wadded up overcoat, whacking the waters, and the waters separate, and they go across with their feet on dry ground. You see, this is part of a cinematic recurrence again and again, a theme, a motif within the Bible. God's power held in the staff of Moses, God's power in the mantle of Elijah has the power to separate water. And then we read from Elijah asks Elisha, what do you want from me? You've been following me all of this time. I'm about to be taken to God. What is it that you want from me? And Elisha says what? I want a double portion of your mantle. I want 2 scoops of ice cream. I want twice a measure of power. But what we don't catch in our modern reading is that this was the gift that was given to the eldest son. In the patriarchy of that time, the eldest son received twice a double portion. But it wasn't just twice, it was 2/3. The eldest son got 2/3. So what Elisha is asking Elijah is, give me 2/3 of the power that you have that is God's. You have God's power. I've seen you use it. You've slaughtered all of these other prophets. You've stood up to the king. Give me 2/3 of that power, and it will make me enough to be a great prophet of God. Elijah wants the power of God to do God's work. Pretty amazing. Pretty cinematic. And then the Bible gets even weirder. Suddenly there are chariots of fire in a whirlwind in the sky. Would this freak you out? It'd make me a little nervous, yes? And there are these chariots of fire being towed by horses. And they swirl and they draw up Elijah while Elijah watches, and Elijah grabs onto the cloak and holds onto it and watches. Father, Father, he says, venerated one, the chariots are coming to get you. And God sucks Elijah up into the sky amidst the burning chariots. Somewhat amazing? Yeah? By the way, so we know that Moses separated the waters, right? And we know that Elijah separated the waters. Who else? Elisha does it. We read about that in our story as well. And then there is one other. Do you know who? Let me look it up. Oh, Joshua. Joshua, in the 3rd chapter, Joshua succeeds Moses, and he too separates the water. 4 people separated the water. Seems like Cecil B. DeMille didn't do his job. Well, it seems like we've got a lot more movies and wonderful ones to make. And Elisha takes and removes his clothes and puts the cloak of Elijah in his hand and separates the waters, and they pass back through the Jordan to where all of the other prophets are waiting to welcome him with open arms. Why the parting of the water? What does the parting of the water symbolize other than they didn't want to get their feet wet? It symbolizes the power of God at work in the prophet. This is the power of God, and even a 2/3 measure of the power of God permits you to separate the waters and to move through. So it goes, the power of God. The power of Moses in Exodus 14 goes to the power of Joshua in the 3rd chapter of the book of Joshua. So the power of Elijah is the power of Moses, and that goes to Elisha as well. God's power remains. Moses to Joshua, Elijah to Elisha. God is beginning again, beginning a new chapter. God's power remains. New prophets, new leaders, new tools, new skills, new beginnings. God begins again. Now is the time to begin again. So let me give you just a real subtle theological point, because that's what we do sometimes. Notice who is beginning again. It's not Elijah. Elijah is done. It isn't Elisha. Elijah continues on. It is God who begins again. It is God who begins anew. This point becomes subtle and important, at least for me, because when I have to start over in life, which I've had to do many, many times, I pray to God, help me begin again. And God begins anew with me. God begins anew. So when you're feeling stuck, when you're feeling left out, when you're feeling lonely, when you're feeling lost, when your church has to start over again, remember it is God who is going with you to begin anew again. 1866. Anybody know the significance of that date around here? Where's my historians? I know somebody does. 1866, the founding of Union Church, the first meeting of the Congregational Society. And Union Church begins, and it is time, friends, for Union Church to begin again, to begin our lives again, to strike out and form new opportunities. God begins anew, and our lives begin again. And I'll get to that in just a minute. But let me dig just a little deeper with this. God begins anew. Moses and Joshua and Elijah and Elisha and Mary and Jesus and Peter and Paul and Martha and the other Mary and Martin Luther King Jr., just because we need names to be confusing. Muhammad and Mahatma and Buddha. And if that seems a little male heavy, let me quickly add Miriam and Deborah and Phoebe and Priscilla and Junia and Hildegard of Benin and Catherine of Siena and Teresa of Avignon, just because names are confusing, Teresa of Calcutta, and I would add Malaya Yousafzai, and I would nominate Greta Thunberg in that list. You know, you got 3 male pastors in this church right now. That's something that I have to work through every time we have staff meetings. You are to be congratulated. You've had a woman senior. You've had many women pastors come through here, and I've known a good many of them, and many of them have been really fine pastors. But God began again and began through the United Church of Christ, our beloved United Church of Christ. You see, for more than a millennia, it was a deliberate misreading of the Apostle Paul that only men could be ordained. Hooey. Did you just notice a list of many, many women who made biblical impact? So God began anew. And in 1851, shortly before this church was founded, our United Church of Christ predecessor, this church's founding, actually ordained Antoinette Brown Blackwell. They didn't let her preach right away. Let's not get carried away. But she became a prominent and powerful leader of the church. And we were the first mainline Protestant denomination to ordain women. Good for us. God. Yes, God begins again and again and again, reimagining relationships, futures, and possibilities. So, Union Church of Hinsdale, it's time for you to begin again. Time for new leadership. I'm temporary. By the way, all pastors are temporary. Yeah? You've had a whole slew of us. I'm just signed up to be temporary. But it's time for new leadership, time to bring out the mantle and part the waters, time to start a fresh direction, to take new chances, to stop fighting about where we've been. And let me be candid, you're still fighting about the Vietnam War. You are. It still carries on in the memory of this church. Dwight David Eisenhower was President of the United States when we first went into Vietnam. Can we let that one go? Please? Let's start a new direction. Let's start taking new chances. Stop fighting about where we've been and start imagining where we're going. And in the age in which we live, in this time, in this context, in this place, we need a new Elijah, we need an Elisha, or maybe an Elisha. It is time for prophetic leadership. Time for a new prophet. But here's the great news. We don't begin alone, we go with God, for we carry the mantle of the past. And we don't go dumber than we were before, we go wiser and better because we've been around for a while. We've learned from our mistakes, I trust, I hope. And we have old tools to bring to our new tools and our new beginnings. It's time to begin again and again. I have a friend who got married the second time. Her first husband's name was John. Do you know who she married the second time? You know why? Didn't have to learn a new name. Seems wise to me. Some of us are at the end of a relationship. Some of us are experiencing death. And we have to start to figure out what it means to be alive differently. Some of us are divorcing or getting into new relationships. We have to figure out what it means to begin and begin again. Some of us are going to school for the first time, away to college. So excited and so terrified that we have to begin and begin again. Some of us are going to junior high, learning to be and to be new again. Some of us are going to high school. Some of us are starting new jobs. Some of us have moved to new communities. Some of us are interim pastors in another church, and we're trying to figure out what it is to begin and begin again. But we are not going alone. We have old tools to bring to new skills and new beginnings. And it's time to part the waters of the things that have been holding you back and to start anew and afresh. So lift up and strike the burdens of life with God's mantle and set yourself free to begin and to begin again. We begin again wiser and better. We've learned from old times. We've brought our old tools to new skills and new beginnings. It's time for change, for new prophets, for new leaders. A whirlwind has come, and the past has been sucked up and brought away with chariots of fire. God's power remains. It is time to begin again.